Warrior Cats, Leopardstar's Honor by Erin Hunter, Chapter 2. Leopard Kit shook the water from her paws and shuddered. Crossing the stepping stones had been scarier than she'd imagined. They were so far apart, and the river had swirled hungrily between them as though it were hoping she'd fall in. But this was the only way out of camp, and she didn't want to try swimming. She hurried into the reeds before anyone could see her and hoped none of the other kits would wonder where she'd gone. She wove between the stems, keeping out of sight. Grapefruit and Willow Breeze had already followed the shores as far as the bulrushes, and had taken a path away from the river. She overheard them planning to hunt frogs in the water meadow. If Mudfur refused to teach her any hunting skills before she became a paw, then she'd have to learn by herself. She wasn't ready to catch fish yet, but frog hunting would be a useful skill, and her mentor would be impressed by how much she knew when she started her training. Grapefruit and Willow Breeze were following a narrow path, and Leopard Kit shadowed them through the reeds until they opened onto a wide stretch of grass. She watched them cross the water meadow to a puddle that shimmered like heat haze beneath the hot sun. They began to sniff around the edge. Grapefruit dropped suddenly into a crouch, her ears pricking. Willow Breeze froze, a tail length behind. As the frog leaped into the shallow pool, Grapefruit lunged after it. Leopard Kit blinked. She was so fast. The frog hadn't even hit the water before Grapefruit caught it and hooked it toward her. With a swift bite, she killed it and sat back on her haunches. Good catch, Willow Breeze mewed. Her gaze was already scanning the next pool. Leopard Kit leaned farther forward, her pelt tingling. She wanted to try lunging and throwing her paws out, just like Grapefruit had. But she'd made the reeds rattle, and the warriors might hear her. She'd practice later, when she was back in camp. She knew that if she tried, she could be as fast as Grapefruit, perhaps faster if she practiced enough. Willow Breeze was stalking toward the next pool. Leopard Kit noticed how the warrior's ears were half flattened against her head, and how she kept her belly low, and her tail skimming the grass. The silver tabby moved one paw at a time, placing each gently on the grass as she drew herself forward. Leopard Kit tried to mimic her, moving between the reeds as slowly and silently as she could, watching Willow Breeze out of the corner of her eye as she copied every careful step. Her attention was fixed so intently on Willow Breeze that when the rushes swished behind her, she barely noticed. Only when a familiar scent washed her tongue did her heart lurch. She jerked around as snowy fur flashed between the stems, and Whitefang pushed the reeds aside with his broad shoulders. He stared at her sternly. "What are you doing out of camp?" She gave him an apologetic mew. "I'm sorry." She nodded toward Grapefruit and Willow Breeze. "I came to watch them. I thought the meadow would be safe to learn how to hunt." Whitefang grunted. "Nowhere outside camp is safe for a kit," he murmured. "You don't even know how to stay low and keep out of sight." I'm trying to learn," she mewed earnestly. "Look." She began to copy Willow Breeze's stalking technique once more. Whitefang watched her. "Your tail's too high." He stepped toward her. "When you're hunting, your tail should never be higher than your spine. It'll give you away." Leopard Kit's tail drooped. "Is that better?" "Now you're dragging it along the ground." Whitefang nosed the tip a little higher. "There." He stood back. "Try again." Leopard Kit began to stalk once more, remembering to flatten her ears. Keep your ears from twitching," Whitefang told her. "That's right. Now crouch a little lower. Yes, that's good." Excitement began to fizz in Leopard Kit's fur. She was training like a real paw. "Let the air flow over your tongue," Whitefang added. Leopard Kit opened her mouth. The scent of the wet soil and damp stems filled it. She was surprised to find they smelled mustier than the reeds from the camp. Were other smells different too? A thought popped into her mind. "Does live prey smell the same as dead prey?" she asked. She only smelled the dead prey the patrols brought back from hunting. "That's a smart question." Whitefang looked impressed. "Live prey smells sweeter and more delicate, but a frog still smells like a frog and a fish smells like a fish. Can we look for a live frog so I can learn what it smells like?" Leopard Kit looked at him hopefully. Whitefang's gaze lit up as though he wanted to show her, and she pricked her ears excited. Then he frowned. "Mudfur will be mad if he thinks I've been training you." He mewed. He jerked his muzzle toward the camp. "I'd better get you home." Leopard Kit dug her paws into the marshy ground. "Can't we train just a little more? If Mudfur notices you're missing, You could tell him I'm ready to be a paw, she pressed hopefully. He'd listen to you. Mudford doesn't listen to any cat when it comes to his kid, Laughing mewed. Come on, we should head back. Leopardkit sighed. Are you going to tell him I sneaked out of camp? Laughing pushed the reeds apart and nodded her through the gap he made. I'll have to, he told her. You smell like meadow water. Leopardkit padded past him. She was still determined to learn as much as she could while she was out of camp. Does meadow water smell different from river water? He patted after her. Taste the air, he mewed. She let it stream over her tongue. It was tinged with sweetness. As they pushed their way from the reeds and padded along the river, she spoke again. He spoke again. Taste it now. She opened her mouth, surprised she hadn't noticed the difference earlier. Meadow water tastes like grass, she mewed. River water tastes like stone. Exactly, Wifang mewed. Of course, it changes with the weather. How? When it rains and the river's churned up, it tastes more like mud, Wifang mewed. And in Leaf Bear, it changes again. The cold sharpens the scent of the river, and the meadow tastes of peat. Leopardkit's pelt prickled with eagerness. There was so much to learn. She hardly noticed they'd reached the stepping stones. Her chest tightened as she saw them. Since Skykit's cruel attack, she felt less confident about swimming than she had before. She shivered. Even now she saw the river swirling around the stones. She could feel the panic that had gripped her when water had flooded into her mouth and nose. Wifang paused beside her. It's probably safer if I carry you across. He grabbed her scruff between his teeth and scooped her up. Her relief at not having to cross the stones turned to hot embarrassment as he carried her all the way into camp. Sunkit and Frogkit were chasing a butterfly across the clearing. They stopped and stared at her in surprise as Wifang put her down. Where have you been? Sunkit mewed, her eyes wide. Leopardkit stuck out her chin. I went for a walk. Come on. Wifang swished her forward with his tail. You'd better explain yourself to Hailstar. Hailstar? She glanced at Wifang. Did he have to report her to the River Clan leader? But it's best to tell him now, Wifang mewed. He steered her toward the leader's den, woven among the roots of a willow tree. Leopardkit's legs stiffened. Wifang gently stroked her flank with his tail. Go on. He'll find out anyway. You know how quickly news gets around the camp. Leopardkit wondered what the punishment would be for not going to see Hailstar, for turning and running away and only coming back when this had been forgotten. But Wifang was right. Hailstar was going to find out. And she thought, I'm going to convince my clanmates I'm ready to begin my apprenticeship. I should act like a paw and show some responsibility. She puffed out her chest and patted ahead of him as though she wanted to see the clan leader. Mudfur looked up from the fresh kill pile as they passed. He'd been rummaging for prey. Leopardkit, where are you going? Leopardkit felt a wave of dismay. Hi, Mudfur. She tried to sound bright. It wasn't like she'd done anything really wrong. She'd just been trying to learn. But Mudfur's questioning gaze had switched to Wifang. Has something happened? He asked the snowy warrior anxiously. I caught her near the water meadow, Wifang told him. Outside camp? Mudfur hurried toward them, pelt ruffling. I'm taking her to see Hailstar, Wifang told him, to explain herself. Leopardkit's fur was prickling, self-consciously. There's not much to explain, she mewed. I wanted to learn how to hunt frogs, that's all. Wifang nudged her forward, and she padded to the entrance of Hailstar's den. Mudfur was following. She could feel his gaze burning her pelt. Wait here, Wifang told her, as they reached the spot, the root den, and he disappeared through the moss, trailing over the entrance. Leopardkit glanced guiltily at her father. His eyes were glittering with worry. What in StarClan were you doing outside camp? Nothing bad, she told him. I was just... Come in, Leopardkit. Hailstar's mew sounded through the moss. She hesitated, and Mudfur swished her forward with his tail. Go on, he mewed. Paws pricking nervously, she nosed her way inside, relieved when Mudfur followed. Hailstar was sitting beside his nest, his gray pelt dark in the shadowy den. Wifang stood beside him, looking grave. She braced herself for a scolding, but Hailstar was looking at her thoughtfully. It's not safe for a young kid to be out of camp, he mewed. I'm not a young kid, she objected. I'll be ready to become a paw in a moon or 2. 3 moons, Mudfur corrected. Hailstar's ears twitched, but his expression betrayed nothing. Was he angry or amused? 1 moon or 3, you're still too young to be out of camp, he mewed. You've had no training, Mudfur chimed, and you're still small enough for a hawk to steal you. You should never be more than a tail length from a warrior. Leopard Kid stuck out her tail indignantly. That doesn't make sense, she mewed. When we're playing moss ball, we're always more than a tail length. Hush. Hailstar silenced her with a flick of his tail. It's against clan rules for a kit to leave camp, he mewed. If you want to become a warrior, the first thing you need to learn is to follow rules. Leopard Kid opened her jaws to argue some more. Then her gaze sank down toward the space between her paws. She couldn't argue against the warrior code. Hailstar's expression softened. It won't be long before you begin your training, and then you'll wish you were allowed to stay in camp from time to time. Just wait a moon or two. 3 moons, Mudford corrected him. I can't wait 3 moons, Leopard Kid complained. The other kids will be apprentices by then. I don't want to be the last kid left in the nursery. Hailstar narrowed his eyes softly. It must be hard when you've grown up together. Mudford cut in. It's our duty to keep you safe until you're big enough to start training. I'll eat extra prey, Leopard Kid mewed. I'll grow as big as Black Kid, and you'll have to make me an apprentice. Hailstar's whiskers twitched. Did he think this was funny? I mean it, Leopard Kid insisted. I'm sure you do, Hailstar mewed. Frustration itched beneath Leopard Kid's pelt. She had to start training soon. RiverClan's future might depend on it. Whitefang would train me now if you let him. She looked imploringly at the White Warrior. He'd shown her how to stalk today. He clearly thought she was ready, and he was so kind and strong, she knew she could learn a lot from him. He doesn't think I'm too small. Whitefang looked at his paws. Don't be in such a rush, Mudford told her. You'll have plenty of time to be a warrior. But you're the one who told me StarClan saved me for a reason, she argued. That's why I have to start training as soon as possible. Hailstar got to his paws. I'm sure whatever StarClan has in store for you can wait, he mewed. You will start training once I think you're ready. She dug her claws into the ground. I'm ready now. Mudford shooed her toward the entrance with his tail. Don't argue, Leopard Kid. I'm not arguing. I'm trying to explain. She gazed desperately into Hailstar's eyes. Didn't you realize how much this meant to her? I have to serve RiverClan. To honor my mother. Or sacrifice, please. Don't make me wait. He blinked at her, and she saw warmth in his gaze. Have I persuaded him? Hailstar turned to Mudford. What do you think? Leopard Kid felt a stab of dread in her chest. Was her father going to tell the leader that he still had his doubts? She saw Mudford glance at her, holding her eye for a long time. Please agree, she thought desperately. Please tell him you think I'm ready. Mudford turned back to the leader, dipping his head. I will agree with your decision, he mewed, whatever that is. Hailstar looked back toward Leopard Kid. Very well, he said. I suppose we can make you an exception. Thank you. Leopard Kid willed herself not to purr too loudly, as she bowed her head, then turned and ducked through the trailing moss, screwing up her eyes as sunshine dazzled her. Hailstar will be glad, he agreed, she thought, once I become an important RiverClan warrior. Her belly burned with excitement as she remembered that she was a cat with a destiny. Her father had said so, and she was going to prove him right. Skypaw and Sunpaw followed their mentors into the river. Leopardpaw, watching them from shore, shuddered as she saw the water flowing around their legs and rushing beneath their bellies. Full Claw was already midstream, turning to face Sunpaw. Not so fast, he warned. The current is strong here. I've swum in the river lots of times, Sunpaw mewed. Swimming and hunting are not the same thing, Claw said. Take it slowly. Sunpaw did as she was told. Beside her, Softwing was treading water, her strong paws holding her steady in the fast-flowing river. Hold your head up and keep facing upstream, she called to Skypaw. Whitefang nudged Leopardpaw into the shallows. Stay close to the others, he advised. She resisted, her heart pounding. She hadn't gotten more than her belly fur wet in the 2 moons that had passed since the incident with Skypaw. The thought of water covering her muzzle still made her shudder. Well, what if I get swept away? For the first time since she'd been given her apprentice's name, she felt suddenly aware that she was smaller than her denmates. She'd managed to keep up with them easily when their mentors had taken them on their first tour of RiverClan's territory, and then they learned their first battle moves. Her quickness had made up for her size, but today, faced with her first fishing lesson, she felt sick with fear. Whitefang blinked at her kindly. I'll be with you, he mewed. I won't let you get swept away. But what if water goes up my nose? She remembered how it had made her splutter and cough. But how could she admit it? She was a river clam cat. She wasn't supposed to be afraid of water. Sunpaw waded in deeper and pushed off into the stream, the water flowing over her shoulders. Skypaw followed, nearly as comfortable as a water vole in the rushing river. She ducked suddenly beneath the surface and then bobbed up again, shook water from her ears. "Hurry up," she called to Leopardpaw as she swam easily around Soft Wing. Leopardpaw felt a twinge of irritation. "I wouldn't be scared if you hadn't pushed me under." Did Skypaw even remember what she'd done? "Come on, Leopardpaw." Sunpaw had swam into an eddy in the middle of the river and was letting it swirl her around. "It's fun." Leopardpaw stared at her, wishing she weren't so scared. She tried to force her paws forward, but they felt like they were made of stone. Whitefang glanced at her for a moment, then switched his tail. "Let's head upstream," she mewed. "There's a pool there. It's shallow enough to wade in, and sometimes fish get caught there. We can check it for prey." He called to Softwing. "We're gonna see if there's anything in the minnow trap," he told her. "We'll catch up later," Softwing mewed, nudging Skypaw into a patch of smooth water. Leopardpaw followed Whitefang, avoiding the gaze of the others. Her pelt prickled self-consciously as they headed upstream. If she didn't get over her fear of the river, her denmates would start calling her a drypaw. Worse than that, how would she ever fulfill her destiny? She couldn't save RiverClan if she was too scared to swim. "I'm not a drypaw," Leopardpaw glared at Blackpaw. "Skypaw said you won't even get your belly fur wet," he mewed back. "That's not true," Leopardpaw snapped. The minnow pool had been so deep the water had nearly reached her shoulders, and she ducked down to let it wash over her back so that her pelt was completely soaked when she returned to camp. Outside the apprentice's den, Skypaw was dozing after the morning in the river. Leopardpaw could see the brown tabby's ears twitching. Was she listening to her brother tease Leopardpaw? I'm sure you did tell him I wouldn't swim." Frogpaw was lying in the soft grass beside the den. He took another bite of trout and chewed it slowly, his gaze on Leopardpaw. "She's still kind of small," he told Blackpaw. "Perhaps she's scared she'll get eaten by a pike." Blackpaw's eyes glittered mischievously. "I'd heard pikes can swallow kids whole." "I'm not a kid," Leopardpaw mewed loud hotly. "You're only 5 moons old," Frogpaw pointed out. "Nearly 6, Leopardpaw corrected him. "And I've got my apprentice name." Blackpaw's whiskers twitched. "That doesn't mean a pike won't swallow you." Leopardpaw turned her tail on him. Sunpaw padded out of the dirt place tunnel and crossed the clearing. She stopped beside Leopardpaw, clearly noticing her ruffled pelt. "What's wrong?" she mewed. Leopardpaw fluffed out her fur. She wasn't going to tattle, but Frogpaw answered for her. Blackpaw's teasing her about being a drypaw. She took another mouthful of trout. Sunpaw jerked her nose towards Skypaw. "I told you not to say anything." Skypaw opened her eyes and blinked at her denmates innocently. He asked how training went, that's all. She sat up and stretched, and I just mentioned how Leopardpaw preferred fishing in the middle pool rather than the river. "That was Whitefang's idea," Sunpaw reminded her sharply. "Only because he saw the look on Leopardpaw's face," Skypaw mewed casually. When he nosed her toward the river, she looked as if he'd asked her to jump off Sunning Rocks. "I did not." Leopardpaw choked back the words. She wasn't going to get into an argument. It would make her seem even more like a kid. But she was going to stop being scared of the water. She was going to show her denmates that StarClan had a plan for her. Crossly, she sat down beside Frogpaw and took a bite of the trout. "Wouldn't it be better to practice battle moves instead?" She gazed eagerly at Whitefang as they stood on the riverbank. "The others were fishing here earlier. They probably frightened all the best fish away." Whitefang frowned thoughtfully. "I guess we'd have a better chance at catching something if we waited until tomorrow," he agreed. Leopardpaw felt a rush of relief. Battle moves were important. She could get over her fear of the water tomorrow. It would be easier then, with more fish to distract her. Tomorrow came and went, then another and another. There was so much to learn about RiverClan's territory and battle skills and tactics, and which fish swam in which part of the river. Leopardpaw became skilled at fishing in shallow pools where fish found themselves trapped. Whitefang didn't seem to argue when she found other ways to hunt that kept her pelt dry. Perhaps he was pleased she was so resourceful. He seemed impressed that she was always the first to find patches of shade near the bank or fish sheltered from the sun. She could spot a brown trout even in murky water, and she was so fast she could hook it out before it saw her shadow and tried to swim away. As her warrior assessment grew steadily closer, she felt surer and surer that tomorrow she'd face her fear of the river and simply dive in, but every day she found another excuse to put it off. "Do it again," Tim first circled Leopardpaw and Frogpaw as they faced each other in a clearing beside the camp. Leopardpaw dropped into a battle crouch, her muscles aching. How many times will they have to practice this move? "Keep your belly low," Timberfur told her. The dark brown Tom touched his tail tip to Frogpaw's shoulder. He thrust a paw suddenly into Frogpaw's haunches. The great Tom wobbled and fought to stay on his paws. "You need to be properly balanced." Epping stood back and watched, and Leopardpaw felt her mentor's gaze ran along her flank. She tried not to tremble from the effort of keeping still while Frogpaw eased himself back into the battle stance. "Ready?" Timberfur looked from Leopardpaw to Frogpaw. They nodded at the same time. "Attack." Frogpaw leaped at Leopardpaw, but she was a moment faster and was already rearing as he reached her. She hooked her paws into his scruff and balanced him with a sharp jerk and sent him staggering again. Away. "Good." Timberfur nodded at her, then nudged Frogpaw back to the center of the clearing and whisked his tail. Again. Leopardpaw blinked at him, her heart sinking. "Again? You'll keep doing it until you both got it perfect," Timberfur told her. Leopardpaw nodded and tried not to sigh as she retook her original position, wondering once more how many times she would have to repeat these battle moves. It wasn't always fun being a cat with a destiny. "I really thought I'd do it this time." Leopardpaw felt anxious as she whispered to Sunpaw. They were curled in their nest at the end of a hard day's training. Moonlight was filtering in through the woven willow roof of the den, and the other apprentices were already asleep. The sound of their gentle breathing filled the air while frogs croaked in the distance, and a curlew called out across the water meadow. Leopardpaw rested her chin on the side of her nest, feeling wary with disappointment. "But I just froze." "Again?" Sunpaw blinked at her unsympathetically, her amber eyes reflecting the silvery light. Whitefang pointed out a chub in the middle of the river, and I tried to go in. The water was past my belly, but I just couldn't dive under. Leopardpaw's belly tightened. She was beginning to think she'd never have the courage to swim like the other River Clan warriors. How was she going to save their clan? Was Whitefang angry? Sunpaw asked. No, Leopardpaw was beginning to wonder if her mentor had simply given up hope that she'd ever swim. He just pointed out a tiny trout near the edge where I could reach it. He sounded really disappointed. Would it be easier if he wasn't watching? Sunpaw asked. I don't know. Whitefang was so kind and patient, she couldn't believe he was the problem. It was her own lack of courage that was to blame. Leopardpaw watched Skypaw and Blackpaw drag a tattered old nest from the elder's den. She was relieved that she hadn't been given cleaning duty. She woke in early that morning and was already hunting for frogs in the reed bed, with Loudpaw and Sedgepaw by the time Shellheart began handing out the day's assignments. Frogpaw patted to her side. Should we help them? He asked. After we've eaten, Leopardpaw mewed. It wasn't her fault they'd woken late. Besides, her belly was rumbling with hunger. She padded toward the fresh kill pile, but Reedpaw was already carrying a large brim toward the apprentice's den. He dropped it outside and beckoned her with his tail. Let's share this, he called. Leopardpaw hurried over toward him, Frogpaw at her tail. The brim smelled fresh and tasty, her mouth watering. Leopardpaw leaned down to take a bite. Leopardpaw! Sunpaw's mew made her jerk around. Her friend was hurrying toward her. Come with me. She nosed Leopardpaw away from the brim. But I'm hungry, Leopardpaw complained, glancing at the fish. If you come with me, you can have the best meal ever. Leopardpaw widened her eyes. What do you mean? Follow me, Sunpaw told her. Curious, Leopardpaw followed her friend out of the camp and along the shore to where the river widened and slowed before it tumbled into the gorge. Sunpaw stopped and looked across the green water. Leopardpaw followed her gaze. The scent of carp touched her nose, and she saw a fat, shiny fish lying on the far bank. Carp's your favorite, right? Sunpaw asked. Leopardpaw swiped her tongue around her jaws. Yes, good, said her. That's my catch over there. But if you swim to it, I'll share it with you. Leopardpaw stiffened. She guessed what her friend was trying to do. Sunpaw had clearly gone to a lot of effort to set this up and was willing to share her carp, but it would be far easier to go back to camp and eat brim with Frogpaw and Reedpaw. She blinked at the pale gray sheep cat. Can't I try later? She mewed hopefully. The carp won't taste as good later, Sunpaw told her. And you'll be disappointed in me. Leopardpaw looked back at the fish. A heron was standing on a stone a few lengths upstream. If it caught sight of the carp lying there unguarded, it would swoop in and steal it. Sunpaw glanced at the heron and then at Leopardpaw. If you don't hurry up, we'll both lose it, she mewed. Her voice sounded like White Fang had, the day she hadn't been brave enough to swim to the middle of the river to catch a chub. Leopardpaw felt no braver now than she had then. She was sure that if she dived into the water, she'd sink before she reached the other side. Water would fill her nose and mouth, and she might never breathe again. Her heart thumped like a trapped badger in her chest. Sunpaw nudged her toward the river edge. Just do it. Just do it. Sunpaw was watching her with large, hopeful eyes. The heron was shifting on its stone, its gaze flitting over the bank. Okay. Leopardpaw took a steadying breath. If I die, then I die. Drowning might be better than spending the rest of her life as the warrior who never dared to swim. Ignoring the fear churning in her belly, she waded into the water. Panic began to pulse in her paws. She felt sick, but she kept going, feeling the water touch her belly fur, then rise around her flanks, until it was lapping over her spine. Closing her eyes, she pushed away from the shore and plunged into the deep water. The chill of it set her blood roaring in her ears. She churned the water. Where was the bottom? Terror sparked in every hair of her pelt as she realized it was out of reach. She flailed her paws, feeling as clumsy as a ThunderClan warrior. You can do it! She heard Sunpaw's mew and glimpsed her friend swimming a tail length away. I won't let you drown. Leopardpaw fought to stay above the surface. Water splashed up her nose and stung her eyes. Remember what Mudfur taught you. She remembered the swimming lessons her father had given her when she was a kid. Let the water hold you up. His mew rang in her mind. It will if you trust it. She'd swum then and before she knew enough to be frightened. You're a river crown cat, Mudford had told her. Swimming is in your blood. She pictured her father swimming ahead of her, as easily as a fish, and always looking over his shoulder to make sure she was okay. His tail just a whisker ahead so she could grab it if she needed. Slowly her panic ebbed, and she felt her paws begin to work together, one reaching out after another and pulling her through the water. You're doing it, Sunpaw called out beside her. I'm doing it. Charm swelled in Leopardpaw's chest as her paws fell into a rhythm. Mudfur was right. The water was holding her up. It flowed around her, supporting her and letting her pull herself through it until she felt like a part of the current. A moment later, she felt the river bottom beneath her paws. It was padding onto the far shore, water streaming from her fur. She glared at the heron's eye and arched her back menacingly. Feathers ruffling, it lifted into the air and wheeled away over the reed bed. Sunpaw climbed out after her. She purred with delight. You did it! I did, didn't I? Leopardpaw circled around her, her tail high. She wondered suddenly why it had taken her so long to face her fear. It might be a while before she felt entirely comfortable in the water. She knew now she could do it if she wanted. Next time, I won't let fear stop me. Sunpaw patted the carp and carried it back to Leopardpaw, dropping it at her paws. You can eat it all if you like, she mewed. You've earned it. Leopardpaw blinked at her happily. It'll taste better if we share it, she mewed. I knew you'd do it eventually, Whitefang had told her when they got back to camp. You just needed to find the right time. Since then, her mentor had made her swim every day. You've got a lot of training to catch up on, he told her as he taught her to dive into the deepest parts of the river and how to navigate the currents and where to watch out for eddies and hidden rocks. Soon, she could tell by the bubbles breaking the surface where a fish was lurking and dive for it. Darting so smoothly through the water, it had no chance to escape. Today, though, had been spent on battle techniques. The countless mornings practicing with Frogpaw and Timberfir had given her patience and skill that she hadn't realized until this afternoon, when she had finally beaten Blackpaw in a fight. Tom was bigger and stronger than her, but she noticed his weakness, a tendency to put his weight too much on his hind paws, and had first unbalanced him, then fast as a snake changed her attack so that he didn't have time to avoid the lunge that knocked him to the ground and let her pin him there. Now she lay back as the sun, soft and orange as duck feathers, against the pale evening sky sank behind the moor. The long spine of the carp she shared with her denmates curved in front of her. Sunpaw was washing beside her while Skypaw was licking the last scraps of flesh from between the bones. When I'm a warrior, Skypaw mewed between nibbles, I'm gonna volunteer for every patrol. She scooped out a fish flake with her tongue. And I'll ask Hailstar if I can lead one. I don't want to lead patrols, Sunpaw mewed. I'm happy just being part of one. Leopardstar looked toward the camp entrance, hoping Mudfur would return soon. She'd saved him a small rainbow trout that she'd caught while she'd been training. Trout was his favorite, and she couldn't wait to show him how she'd fished it out of the water without breaking the skin, except for the neat bite mark where she'd killed it. I wonder when the border patrol will be back, she mewed. Soon, Sunpaw guessed. They were only going to check the Sunny Rocks border. If they see any Thunderclan warriors, I hope they shred them. Leopardstar ruffled her pelt crossly. Thunderclan had stolen Sunny Rocks a few moons ago, and she hadn't forgiven them. Those squirrel chasers are so greedy. Isn't the forest enough for them? I guess they think Sunny Rocks is part of the forest, Sunpaw mewed. Why? Leopardstar flicked her tail. Sunny Rocks has always belonged to RiverClan. They have no right to it, and they know it. Reedpaw said that if he was leader, he'd take Sunny Rocks back, Skypaw mewed. Leopardpaw sniffed. She wondered why Skypaw seemed to care so much about what Reedpaw said. Why are you always so impressed by Reedpaw's bragging? She narrowed her eyes. Do you like him? Skypaw sat up. So what if I do, she mewed. He's going to be a great warrior, and he's so handsome. Sunpaw glanced shyly at her paws. Beetlenose is handsomer. Skypaw's eyes widened. Do you like Beetlenose? Maybe. Sunpaw glanced at Leopardpaw. Who do you like? Me? Leopardpaw hadn't thought about it. She didn't care about Tom. She was too busy with her training. No cat. Really? Skypaw blinked at her. What about Frogpaw? You two seem close. We just train together, she mewed. That's all. Are you sure? Skypaw pushed the fish carcass away. Her eyes sparkled teasingly. He's quite cute. I thought you liked Reedpaw. Leopardpaw mewed back. Before Skypaw could enter, the camp entrance rustled and Hailstar padded through it. Folklaw followed with Crooked-Jaw at his heels. Mudfur was leaning heavily against a RiverClan deputy. Leopardpaw sat up, her belly tightening with alarm. Her father was limping. Clumps of fur stuck out from his pelt. She could see gashes along his flank, and his muzzle was scratched and bleeding. Mudfur! She raced across the clearing. Hailstar waved her away. He's okay, he told her, but his wounds need dressing. Go back and wait with your denmates while Brahmaberry seized him. But go. Hailstar's eyes were dark. This is warrior business. Leopardpaw backed away, but couldn't bring herself to leave. She stared anxiously on Mudfur. I'm okay, her father promised. Do as Hailstar says. Leopardpaw held her ground. What happened? Mudfur fought for Sunny Rocks. Crooked-Jaw guided Mudfur toward the shade of the willow. Leopardpaw began to follow. On his own? Against Adderfang to decide who they belonged to, Crooked-Jaw told her. Troutclaw circled the patrol as it crossed the clearing. Who won? Mudfur. Folklaw told him. Sunny Rocks belongs to RiverClan again. As Brahmaberry heard from the medicine den, a wad of herbs in her jaws, warriors began to cluster around the returning patrol. Leopardpaw shifted one way, then the other, trying to keep her father in sight. Go back and wait with your denmates, Hailstar told her again, more sternly this time. They have important matters to discuss. Reluctantly, Leopardpaw backed away. Skypaw padded to her side. Why did Mudfur have to fight alone? I don't know. Leopardpaw didn't care. She just wanted to know how bad her father's injuries were. Her belly churned as she tried to get a glimpse of him, but more and more warriors were getting in the way, clustering eagerly around Hailstar and the others, while Brahmaberry tended to Mudfur. Ottersplash and Pipetooth paced around them, their tails twitching excitedly as Hailstar conferred with Timberfur and Rippleclaw. Leopardpaw swallowed back frustration. What was happening? She felt Skypaw's nose brush her ear. I'm sure he'll be okay, the pale brown tabby mewed. You'll be able to talk to him soon. She stiffened as Ottersplash hurried toward them. Did you hear? Ottersplash's ears twitched. Mudfur's going to become a medicine cat. Leopardpaw blinked. What are you talking about? He just told Hellstar he wants to give up being a warrior and train as a medicine cat. Ottersplash mewed. Leopardpaw could hardly believe her ears. Mudfur was one of the strongest warriors in RiverClan. He just won back Sunning Rocks. Single pawed. Why? Ottersplash returned her gaze blankly. You'll have to ask him yourself. I'm sure he has his reasons, Skypaw told her, but he's never mentioned wanting to be a medicine cat. He'd have told me this if it was something he'd been thinking about, right? She thought, of course he would have, so maybe he's only saying this now because he's not thinking all that clearly after his fight. Time dragged as she waited for a chance to speak to Mudfur. She paced, her heart pounding as the sun began to sink toward the distant moor, until at last the crowd of warriors began to disperse. Hellstar led Outersplash and Pipetooth to the edge of the camp. Willowbreeze padded to the fresh-killed pile and took a trout to the Elder's Den. Folklaw called to his clanmates, organizing a patrol. Softwing began to tidy a pile of frog bones away from the warrior's den. Come and help me, she called to Skypaw. Skypaw hesitated. Will you be okay? She asked Leopardpaw. Yeah. Leopardpaw didn't look at her. Thanks. She was staring at Mudfur. As Skypaw headed away, she hurried to her father's side. Mudfur, she inspected his pelt, relieved to see that the bleeding had stopped. Mudfur had propped himself up on his forepaw as Brownberry laid cobwebs over a wound on his leg. His eyes brightened as he saw Leopardpaw. Don't worry, I'm fine. Leopardpaw crouched beside him. Are you sure? Of course. He gave a weak purr. Brownberry looked up from her work. He'll need to take it easy for a while. That shouldn't be hard. Mudfur gave a husky snort. Now that I won't be a warrior. Leopardpaw felt a sharp tug in her heart, like snagged claws. He's serious. But why? She stared at her father. Was the fight that bad? Mudfur nudged her shoulder with his muzzle. I would do it again if I had to, she mewed. I just don't want to. Leopardpaw didn't understand. She couldn't imagine not wanting to be a warrior. But why not? I'm tired of fighting the same battle over and over again, he told her. Nothing ever seems to get settled. Brownberry was chewing herbs. She spat the pulp onto her paw and began to work it into a bite mark on Mudfur's tail. There are more ways to help your clan than fighting. But Mudfur trained as a warrior, Leopardpaw argued. RiverClan needs him. Brownberry didn't look up from her work. Mudfur spoke instead. RiverClan needs medicine cats too, he mewed. Leopardpaw looked at him, suddenly noticing the gray hairs flecking his pelt. Was he just feeling old? She felt suddenly protective. I'm sure you'll be a great medicine cat, but she still didn't understand how he could give up being a warrior. Maybe one day RiverClan won't have to fight battles, she mewed. Mudfur looked unconvinced. Life isn't that simple, he mewed. But you're too young to understand. No, I'm not. Had he forgotten that he told her she was special, that one day she'd save RiverClan? What if I make RiverClan so strong we never have to fight again? He purred indulgently. That would be great. She could tell he didn't believe her, but she would show him. She'd make him see that RiverClan didn't have to fight the same battles over and over again. She lapped his ears gently. He must be in pain as she worked at them. Cleaning the blood from his fur. Her thoughts quickened. Perhaps it had been Mudfur's destiny to become Medicine Cat all along. If it was, did it mean that when he'd said she was special enough to save all the clans, his words had been a prophecy? A half-moon later, Leopardpaw crouched on the riverbank. She'd been far too busy training for her warrior assessment to worry about Mudfur's prophecy, or his minnow-brained idea of becoming a medicine cat. Whitefang had worked her hard, and she tried her best to impress him. Now assessment day had arrived, and she and her denmates were being tested. She sniffed the 2 dead voles that lay at her paws. The apprentices had been told to bring back land prey, and now she was wondering if the water voles she'd caught counted as land prey or river prey. Perhaps she should head into the strip of forest that lay on this side of the river and catch a mouse. She glanced among the trees as Whitefang watched from the undergrowth. Was Whitefang watching her from the undergrowth? She knew he'd be keeping an eye on her progress. Had she done enough to earn her warrior name? A branch jutting over the river shivered above her. Leaves showered down, and she looked up. her ears pricking as she saw Skypaw padding unsteadily along the branch. Her determined eyes were fixed on the squirrel that she'd cornered by the trunk. Excitement sparkled in Skypaw's eyes. The assignment to catch land prey had been hard for apprentices used to hooking fish from the river, and squirrel would be an impressive catch. Leopardstar felt a twinge of envy. Why hadn't she tried to catch a squirrel? At the end of the branch, the squirrel had frozen. Its eyes flashed with panic. Skypaw crouched lower against the branch. Her hind-paws were trembling, and Leopardstar could see that she was about to lunge for the squirrel. She held her breath as Skypaw launched herself forward, but the squirrel darted suddenly upward and disappeared into the leaves above her head. Skypaw landed on the empty branch tip. It dipped under her weight. She hissed in frustration as she fought to get a grip, but the branch snapped and her hind legs swung down. She dangled for a moment before losing her hold, slithering from the branch and splashing into the river below. Leopardstar darted to the edge, her heart lurching as Skypaw disappeared for a moment, but soon her head burst back through the surface. The tabby's gaze burned with rage as she swam to the shore and hauled herself out of a few tail lengths downstream. Bad luck, Leopardstar called. Skypaw scowled at her. Why did they tell us to catch lamprey? She snapped. It's not fair. I've been practicing fishing. They should have warned us. You can have one of these. Leopardstar pushed a vole toward Skypaw. Her sympathy for her denmate wrestled with the wry thought that she was only good at catching land prey because of that day Skypaw had given her a fear of water. It had been just a moon or so since Leopardstar had stopped hating her for it. The pale brown tabby whisked her tail irritably. Do you want me to be accused of cheating? With a huff, she headed into the forest. I'll catch my own prey, thanks. Leopardstar decided not to go after her. Skypaw was right. She had to do this alone. Back at camp, Loudpaw, Slumpaw, and Blackpaw had already returned with their catch. As Leopardstar padded into the clearing, Hailstar was looking pleased, and Oakheart and Volclaw were purring, their pelts fluffed with pride. Leopardstar guessed that the three apprentices had passed the assessment. Whitefang was standing beside the River Clan leader. Leopardstar dropped her vole to his paws, blinking at him anxiously. Does this count as land prey? She mewed. You caught them on land, he told her, so they count. She let a wave of relief. Then I passed? Whitefang touched his muzzle to her head. Yes. Happiness surged in her chest as she began to purr. Frogpaw and Reedpaw trotted into camp, Sedgepaw at their heels. All three of them were carrying prey. Hailstar nodded approvingly as they laid their catch in front of him. It seemed every cat had passed the assessment. River Clan leader looked toward the camp entrance. Where's Skypaw? I just saw her, Leopardstar told him. She was heading into the forest. Without prey? Hailstar frowned. Leopardstar avoided the leader's gaze. She didn't want to tell him that Skypaw had let a squirrel escape. It had been a difficult catch, and she'd been brave to try. Hailstar's tail twitched impatiently. She glanced at the sky. It was past sun high. All the apprentices should have returned by now. She'll be back soon, Leopardstar promised him. Her paws pricked anxiously. Please, Sarkhan, help her catch something. She hurried toward her dead mates. If Skypaw doesn't get back in time, she whispered, we should ask for our naming ceremonies to be delayed until she has a chance to take the assessment again. Blackpaw frowned. But I want my warrior name now. Frogpaw nudged him. An extra day or two won't make a difference. Reedpaw sniffed. What if she doesn't pass next time either? She will, Leopardstar insisted. Slumpaw glanced hopefully at the camp entrance. We don't know for sure, she failed. And as she spoke, Skypaw stomped into camp. She was carrying nothing, and Leopardpaw's heart sank. Tail drooping, Skypaw crossed the clearing to Hailstar. I nearly caught a squirrel, she grunted. He shook his head sadly. Nearly is not enough, he mewed. Softly hurried into camp, blinking sympathetically at Skypaw. Her techniques were excellent, she told Hailstar. I watched her. She did well. Techniques don't feed a clan, he mewed. Until she brings home prey, I can't give her a warrior name. Leopardstar hurried forward. We don't want our warrior names either until Skypaw gets hers. She glanced back at her dead mates. Blackpaw was looking cross, but he didn't argue. Slumpaw padded forward. Skypaw will pass next time, she mewed, and we don't mind waiting until then for our ceremonies. Hailstar looked around at the apprentices. His eyes glowed with warmth. It's good to see such loyalty in our youngest warriors, he mewed. The naming ceremony can wait until Skypaw is ready to join you. Skypaw looked gratefully between Sunpaw and Leopardstar. I don't want to hold you back, she mewed. We can still take care of our clan, even without our warrior names, Leopardstar told her. Besides, you will pass soon. I know you will. Skypaw looked at her chin. I'll make sure I do. A pale silver moon hung low in the sky. The moor top was rosy in the setting sun. Leopardpaw forced her paws to stop trembling as she waited between Mudfort and Whitefang. Her clanmates had gathered and were ringed around the clearing, watching as Hailstar conducted the naming ceremonies. Loudbelly, Blackclaw, Skyheart, and Reedtail were already sitting proudly among the other warriors. Frogleap, Sunfish, and Sedgecreek had just made their promises to Hailstar to protect their clan. It would be her turn next. She would finally receive her warrior name. Mudfort smoothed down the fur between her ears with his tongue. Bright Sky will be watching, she mewed. She'll be as proud of you as I am. Leopardpaw's heart seemed to swell. She purred at him. I'm going to make you even prouder, she promised. As she spoke, Whitefang nudged her forward. It's your turn, he whispered. Hailstar was looking at her expectantly as Frogleap, Sunfish, and Sedgecreek padded away to join the others. She hurried across the clearing, her pelt hot as she felt the eyes of the whole clan on it. She stopped in front of the River Clan leader. She hadn't expected to be so nervous. She swallowed back the butterflies, swarming in her belly. I call upon my warrior ancestors, Hailstar began slowly. Her heart seemed to burst with excitement. This is it. This is the beginning, he went on. To look down on this apprentice, with no mother to guide her. She has been raised by the clan, and it is with special pride that we watch her today pass from apprentice to warrior. She has trained hard to understand the ways of your noble code, and I commend her to you as a warrior of RiverClan. Leopardpaw held her breath, knowing what he would say next, willing him to hurry. Leopardpaw, he mewed at last. Do you promise to uphold the warrior code and to protect and defend your clan, even at the cost of your life? I do, Leopardpaw mewed. I really do. Hailstar's whiskers quivered. Then, by the powers of StarClan, I give you your warrior name. Leopardpaw, from this moment on, you will be known as Leopard Fur. StarClan honors your determination, your independence, and your loyalty, and we welcome you as a full warrior of RiverClan. Leopard Fur looked back at Mudfur, pressing back a purr as his eyes lit up with pride. Whitefang blinked at her happily. Her heart seemed to rise like a bird in her chest.